In this video, I want to talk to you about using grids in InDesign and how that can help your layout and how you can take advantage of the ones that are built in. So, I have my InDesign page set up. I'm going to use all the kind of defaults, 8.5 by 11, single page, facing pages, etc. Go ahead and hit create. My swatches I don't need right now. I'm just going to put that underneath one of my other tools. All right. Let's start out with a two-column layout. So I'm going to go to Layout, Margins and Columns, two-column layout, and hit OK. If I grab my Type tool and drag out I'll drag out a full page just because it'll give me enough type to work with. Because I want two columns here. Type, fill with placeholder text. And now I'll pull this back. There's my half page, my one pica gutter. Click on my plus sign. And now I have my second column. Now, guides and grids are going to be very, very useful for keeping a professional look. Right now, depending on where I kind of lined up, you'll see one of the things is most of the text is going to be on the same line because I'm using the same size. Nothing's been too drastically different. Once we start stylizing our type, that can change. For example, if I open up my paragraph options, if I grab my type tool, if I click in here, I'm going to grab all my text real quick. And I say I want to put a little bit of a space before or after different paragraphs. You can start to see how these don't line up with one another anymore. They start to get offset. And there's more important things than that. For example, if I have designs from one page to the next page to the next, for example, I'm going to add 2 pages here. I might want to make sure that my text on a page like this lines up with my text on the next page over. There's a few ways we can do this. Alignment's really important for having designs look professional, especially when dealing with type. So it's something to really kind of pay attention to. So we know that we can change our margin layouts. So we've talked about that a bunch of times. We can grab a page, 2 columns, 3 columns. We can change our margins, etc. We can also go into grabbing this right here, just clicking in that ruler, and we could drag out these lines here. These are called guidelines. So click into the left, drag out, click to the top, drag out. And these do not print. If I go into preview mode and I hit W, they go away. But these are here so that things can line up from one page to the next or from one text box to the next, whatever it happens to be. So we can use these guides, and you can make as many of them as you want to line different objects up. Now, if you want to get rid of them, you can highlight it and hit delete. If you go into your properties, you'll see that rulers and guides are all based on toggles in 2020. This is new to this version. If we turn on rulers or turn off rulers, you can see them disappear. We could turn on baseline grid and we could turn on document grid. Then we have guides, so we could hide our guides. We can lock our guides, meaning I can't actually move them now. And we also have hide smart guides, which we'll talk about at another time. So what I want to focus on right now is these guys in here. Now, I do not use the document grid in typesetting that much. There have been 1 or 2 projects where I've used this, and it's when you can control how this is set up, and you can get a very, very modular look. It's not something I use a lot in print design. I tend to work this way when I work with web, but in InDesign, I don't use this a ton. However, I do use this, and this is called my baseline grid. So turning that on or off, and I'm really happy with 2020 that it has it super accessible here. It used to be that you had to go and know where the different commands were for it. But I use this key on for all the documents I do. But the change I make in the settings is pretty drastic. So let's go up to, if you click on InDesign and choose Preferences, and I believe if you're on a PC, it's either under File or Edit and then Preferences. and I choose grids out of that option. And you can just go into general and then find it down here as well. I'm going to show you some important things that I tend to do. First thing is the color is light blue. If you're working on a blue document or something and you don't like that, you could change it. I used to always change it to gray. I'm not sure why I did that, but you have that option to change your baseline grid. Now, these are the changes that I personally make. You don't have to make these. This is what I find most useful. I always change start to 0, but not relative to the top of the page. I do it relative to the margins. And what that means is that it's going to start wherever my top margin is. So if I hit OK, I'll come back into this in a second. That sets my lines up only inside my margins, which I personally like. I'm just going to quick key to it. That's Command K if I wanted to get to it with the shortcut. I'll set this back to light blue. Now, the next thing is something that for me, I always figure out after I've solved in my mind what type I'm going to be using, and specifically the size of the type and the size of the leading. The increment that I use is always a multiple or fraction of the leading size, right? So if I am going to make my leading set to 20, I wouldn't use an increment every 12. I'd either use increment every 10 or every 20, and I'll show you why that is in a minute. And now view threshold, that basically means when is this visible? So if I zoom out anything more smaller than 75%, it'll go away. I work on a laptop a lot. I don't like that. I tend to make mine like 40, 45%. You don't have to change this, but just know that if you don't change it and then you zoom out, if you're on a small screen, it'll go away. And the other thing I do personally is I uncheck grids in back, right? So these are just some basic options here. Now, it gives me these blue lines showing my text. And let's say, again, for math's sake, I'm going to use something nice and easy. I'm going to grab all my type, and I'm going to use 10-point leading for 9-point type. Super, super, super tiny. So it's, very tiny magazine or something. I'm just doing this for design purpose, for demonstration purposes. Now you'll see that here, none of those lines line up. If I hit W, it looks fine. However, if I grab all this, and I can do this in a few different spots. If I hit my type tool, I can find it in my paragraph controls. Or again, I like to work with my paragraph dialog box open. So window, type tables, paragraph. And this little guy right here, align to baseline grid. And you'll see it again here. If you're using the property inspector, I just want to show you both. That is something that's really useful to have on for a lot of kind of professional looking documents. What that does is it forces, regardless of how the math works out, it forces your lines of text onto a grid line. Doesn't seem like a big difference, but again, if I grab this and I turn that off, so that's what my text looked like before. This is what my text looks like now. It's just a little bit cleaner, a little bit nicer, right? And now if I combine that with the idea of certain guides, so I'm going to pull a guide down and say my first page is always going to start at the 12 pica mark because that one lined up with a nice baseline. I'm going to put this here, right? When I go to my next page, I can do the same thing. I can say, all right, I want this at the 12 pica mark. Now I've got these here. I can start drawing out more text boxes. I'll just copy and paste the one that I have for a moment. And now I've got this text box that lines up exactly in the same spot as the one before it. Grab another text box again. Make this one my 3 columns. Type. Fill with placeholder. And I can actually link these together without having to have text in them. So I can just click that little empty square if I want to start threading in advance. And just put my cursor in here, type, fill with placeholder text again, just to kind of make it a little longer. And to there, and I know that I said this was 9 point. Right. So now, if I hit W, I can see no matter what, this will be completely aligned, consistent on different pages. I have my guideline. So it allows me a much, much cleaner style of layout than what I would normally have. So a lot of consistency using guides and using the baseline grid. So I use the baseline grid for pretty much every document I do, unless I'm very intentionally trying to break it. I use it on pretty much every project. So hopefully you can see it. I know it seems like a lot of work to set up, and a lot of you will probably think it's not worth it. Trust me, especially if you're dealing with heavy text, taking that time will make things look just a little bit nicer, a little bit more professional for you. Okay? So that's the baseline grid and guidelines.